It's time to go home to Las Vegas. Relax at home, I'm gonna be. What is a soul sister to do? What is a soul sister to be?
Historic neighborhoods are defined by the preservation of architectural designs and buildings. The history is preserved by the community and through preserving the neighborhood's original character. The Harrison House is a tiny home on the historic West Side which opened its doors to Black entertainers in the mid-1950s when they would perform on the Strip but could not stay at the hotels and casinos. The house served musicians like Sammy Davis Jr. and Nat King Cole. The Las Vegas West Side Grammar School is a historic landmark. Built in 1923, the first public school attended by Native Americans and the first school to allow African American students to attend classrooms in the 1940s. The Moulin Rouge Hotel was the first desegregated hotel and casino for African Americans. Once a booming hotel and casino in the historic West Side community, the Moulin Rouge is now a vacant lot, distressed, like many of the areas on the historic West Side. The Christensen home is one of the oldest homes on the historic West Side, owned by an African American couple in the 1930s. The house is now owned by the Las Vegas Catholic Worker, an organization who feeds the homeless and helps those in need. The historic West Side has a prominent history which began with the segregation of the African American community. The Housing Act of 1968 mandated segregation among blacks and whites within the community. Redlining increased residential concentration for blacks on the West Side.
I think that it's an oppressive, dehumanizing policies that make people feel that they don't belong.
The historic West Side has suffered from disinvestment of businesses and government, vacant buildings, distressed neighborhoods, poverty, and homelessness.
This area has a high poverty level too, so that increases the vulnerability for people to be homeless as well. The homeless population has definitely grown since I started, and Catholic Charities has like 2 blocks of buildings serving the needs of the growing population of homeless. In Las Vegas, I came out in 1986 to live in solidarity with the poor. So when a Catholic worker starts a house, they usually try to go into an area where there's need so that they can be present to the people. But this was a poor area. And so in a way, I think that there's an injustice that kind of poverty, people who are on the margins somehow are concentrated in poorer areas because there's not as much resistance. Like you couldn't put a shelter in Summerlin, right? And without there being a lot of people who have power to resist this. They built the freeway and they basically cut off the historic West Side from the newly developed area behind the old railroad, which is like the Smith Center, the museums, the arts, where they're trying to bring, people in and it's a nicer area. So when they built the freeway, they blocked the West Side from being able to get through there. So there was no exit. So that was one of the protests that the Franciscans were involved in with the community, to get a freeway exit on and off ramp into the West Side. I mean, it was community pressure. They changed it. They had to spend all this money to redo it.
I just thought they just built it like that.
Last minute exit.
Despite historic setbacks, historic Westside's legacy survives through the collective spirit of members of the past and present.
See, they say historic West Las Vegas now, but back in the day, it was like, oh, I'm from the West Side. And literally, there wasn't much west of that. There was nothing west of Western High School back when I was a kid. Where we lived was really the west side of town. Now it's more like central Las Vegas, but we still call it the West Side, so they added historic.
Longtime residents of the West Side are able to recount the influence of segregation that excluded them. Community members like Keith Brantley were able to find solace with others through networks of social connectivity and common values, as people often convened in public spaces including churches and the local community center.
Because when I was a kid, when we were growing up, Las Vegas was still very, very segregated. Doolittle was the community center. Period. It was the spot, and like everybody growing up, they could play ball, play at Doolittle. Especially for black kids, we all knew each other because on the weekends we playing at Doolittle. As far as black kids are concerned, we saw each other every weekend. Pretty much, we all knew each other.
Keith's advocacy within the community first started with his love for poetry. The Poets' Corner is essentially a launch pad for local poets, especially for black poets who want to be able to freely express their experience through the art forms of poetry and spoken word.
I'm the host of the Poets' Corner. I've been doing that for the past 20 years. We're 20 years deep into the Poets' Corner. Just a natural storyteller. So I started with the poetry, and I found that I could say so much.
The flag pales. Old glory to the Jolly Roger. Captives dancing like rain dodgers. Sharks feasting like the Last Supper, and children weeping for stolen mothers.
There was a group of black people who was writing poetry at the newly formed West Las Vegas Library. From that, they started a group called the Westside Poets. What I'm gonna have to do is do something of my own. And the crowds were ridiculous. It was phenomenal. And like the people who are known as poets around, especially the black people who are known as poets around Las Vegas now, got their jump off right there at the Poets' Corner.
I do not always feel pretty. Sometimes I drown in my own self-pity, jumping up to breathe in air, realizing I'm my own worst enemy, because I'm the only one that's there.
When I first started the Poets' Corner, it was a black thing. It wasn't that anybody was excluded. You know, plenty of white people have come through and all that. But there was a couple of poets who came out of that. One of them, Trinity. You know, Trinity Smith is, everybody, oh, Trinity is fire. Trinity is fire.
The greater purpose of art in the West Side was through expression of a symbolic experience that extended outside of the geographic area and into public
Art
discourse.
plays a huge role in the community. Anytime you are allowed to express yourself, express your inner self, one, it's good therapy. It's good for you on your inside. And it helps you to also identify yourself. One brother walked up, he said, man, look, if it wasn't for the Poets' Corner every month, he said, I look forward to this. If it wasn't, I'd be somewhere butt naked with a shotgun. Those were his words. I didn't make that up. It gives them an outlet.
Residents of the West Side are also within a transitional period, as the changing demographic and incoming economic influence from the downtown project can help us predict what is ahead.
My favorite place on the West Side is the Art Center, period. I mean, that's because it's fading fast. The West Side is going away. And it's a different demographic. It's largely Hispanic now. In the work since the early 90s is the Downtown Beautification Project. Some Asian group just bought the Town Tavern. So it's going to be absorbed and regentrified, I guess would be the term that I'm looking for. I think that's where it's going.
But the future of the West Side is dependent on a continued action through advocacy and continuing the fight for resources and better institutions for the next generation.
Right behind the Art Center and behind Doolittle over there, you got Matt Kelly. Matt Kelly looks like an institution. I mean, I hate to say that, but it looks like it's got the bars around it and all that. It's like, oh man, that's jacked up. That is not a good my opinion, that is not a good learning environment. So if the community wants to see itself flourish, it's like, let's make some demands. You need to make some improvements on these surroundings. We're part of the Clark County School District like you are. 5th largest school district in the country. You need to pay as much attention to us. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a child to raise a village. Who's going to raise our village? And what are we doing to them early in their lives? If we're institutionalizing them early, what are they going to build?
The Westside has a continual set of challenges ahead, but within it all is its resilience. People like Keith, who no longer live on the Westside, find solace in the memories that keep drawing them back.
I feel at home. I feel at home. What makes it a community is not its geographical dwelling. It's the spirit that brings us in there. Like that art center, for instance. People live everywhere, all over the city, but it's like this mass migration on Sundays. Everybody comes back to that one little section of the West Side, pack in, go to church, then they'll go somewhere nearby maybe to eat.
Undoubtedly, the Westside's reputation often precedes its reality, and members of the present and former often must reiterate one idea.
They're safe, and that's sad. Never anything, I mean, you know, we, as kids, you have your fight, your little fist fights and all that stuff. But I'm talking about racial violence or anything like that. Always happens somewhere else. And it's very, very rare that anything actually happens to anybody on the West Side like that.
The West Side awaits for those ready to experience its truth, being its rich cultural history, communal ties, and testament to the Black experience. Any community is worth it, and it all depends on us.
I would love for everyone, to the best of their ability, to be self-determined. Satisfy yourself and be a responsible part of your community.